A reading from Luke chapter 13, verses 1 through 9. At that very time there were some present who told Jesus about the Galileans whose blood Pilate had mingled with their sacrifices. He asked them, "Do you think that because these Galileans suffered in this way, they were worse sinners than all the other Galileans? No, I tell you, but unless you repent, you will all perish as they did. Or those 18 who were killed when the Tower of Siloam fell on them. Do you think that they were worse offenders than all the other people living in Jerusalem? No, I tell you, but unless you repent, you will all perish just as they did." Then he told this parable. A man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came looking for fruit on it and found none. So he said to the man working in the vineyard, "See here, for 3 years I have come looking for fruit on this fig tree, and I still find none. Cut it down. Why should it be wasting the soil?" He replied, "Sir, let it alone for 1 more year, until I dig around it and put manure on it. If it bears fruit next year, well and good. But if not, you can cut it down."
Years ago, I attended a funeral for the father of a friend of mine. The funeral took place in a small mortuary chapel in the high desert of Southern California. It was midsummer, and about 80 of us suffered through the heat of the afternoon and the heat of the hot air of a long-winded preacher in an oversized suit with a liquidy southern drawl and a silver comb-over that had been fixed permanently by a full can of Aquanet. Picture Reverend Lovejoy from The Simpsons, only a little less interesting and likable. It was clear that for him, this wasn't actually a funeral, it was an evangelistic opportunity. Instead of eulogizing my friend's father, he rattled on and on about the fallenness of humanity, the wages of sin, the gates of hell, and the promise of salvation through Jesus for anyone who repents. And after 45 minutes of listening to this, it occurred to me that not only was this not a funeral, what was actually unfolding here was more like a hostage situation. We were trapped. He knew that nobody would possibly dare get up and walk out of a funeral. I mean, we were stuck. All we could do was endure him, wait him out, wait for that evangelistic pitch, which when it finally mercifully arrived, was entirely predictable and ever so cliche. "Bill is dead," said the preacher. "He's out of time. It's too late for him. We'll never know what he may have planned to do with his life. It's too late. He's dead. Maybe he wanted to straighten out his life, but he can't now. Maybe his heart wasn't right with God. We'll never know. It's over. He's gone. It's too late." As a pastor, I thought to myself, man, this guy is bad for business. "It's too late for Bill," he said, "but it's not too late for you. So what are you waiting for?" "Today," he said, "today is the day to make your decision. Today is the day to give your life to Jesus." After the service, I pulled my friend aside and I apologized for that pastor. I said, "Look, not all of us are like that preacher. And what he said was so inappropriate, manipulative. I'm so sorry." And my friend said, "Yeah, he was a little over the top. But you know what?" said my friend. "What that preacher said got me thinking. Life is short. You never really know how much time you have. There are some things in my life I need to work on," said my friend. And that preacher was at least right about one thing. It's not too late to start. A few weeks ago on Ash Wednesday, I posed a question for us to consider during this 40-day season of Lent. If, hypothetically, you only had 40 days to live, how would you spend your time? What would you give your attention to? What activities, routines, distractions, worries, relationships would not pass the 40-day test. Perhaps it sounds a bit melodramatic, but still. If you knew you had only 40 days to live, how would you live those days? What would you want your life to be about? What would you let go of? What would you make right? If there's one truth about life, it's that we never really know how much time we do have. And while we go about living our lives assuming we have all the time in the world, things happen. Senseless and terrible and unexplainable and incomprehensible things, unexpected and sudden and random things, things we could never imagine happening to us, things we at least didn't think might happen to us so soon. The span of our lives is much shorter than we think. And during that span, things happen that simply shouldn't. We know this to be true in general, but rarely do we ever pause to remember that it might be true for us too. Yet whenever this truth does touch our lives, we are prone to ask the inevitable, universal, timeless question, why? Why do bad things happen to good people? It's only natural to ask such a question, even as we may suspect that the bad things that do happen most often do not make distinctions between good people and bad people. They just tend to happen, often indiscriminately, to all people. Like Jesus once said, the rain falls on the just and the unjust. In today's passage from Luke, Jesus reminds us that there are things that happen in life that cannot be explained or resolved by our theologies. Bad things happen. Why? Well, Jesus either cannot or will not offer an answer to that question, except to answer it with a question of his own. Are you living a good life? A crowd asks him one day why some Galilean worshippers had been slaughtered by Pilate's men in Jerusalem. It was a massacre that had probably made the evening news that week, another senseless act of bloodshed carried out by the Roman military, by the military on the occupied Jews. And the implication behind that question was that there must be some theological explanation, that perhaps somehow those who had been killed maybe got what they deserved, because bad things do not happen to good people, right, Jesus? And Jesus, what about the 18 people who tragically perished when that tower downtown collapsed on them? Again, another headline news story. This one about a seemingly random accident that just happened to catch a group of unsuspecting bystanders in the wrong place at the wrong time. But still, the people were wondering, do you think, Jesus, that this was God's mysterious but sure way of working out divine justice in the world? These are questions we all have likely pondered at some point in our lives. Something happens to us or to someone we love, and we go over our mental checklist of all that we've done wrong, and we quietly wonder if in some way God is settling accounts, balancing the books. It's not that we want God to work this way, but if God did work this way, we figure it might at least explain away the problem of why bad things happen to good people. It would suggest that you could spot a good life, a blessed life, simply by the absence of tragedy or hardship. According to this theology, a life free of trouble, illness, accidents, or mishaps, it would be proof of God's blessing, evidence of God's stamp of approval on your life. If you want to avoid suffering and earn God's blessing, just follow God's rules and don't mess up, ever. It might sound attractive, but it's an impossible theology. Impossible not only because it demands a life of perfection, but also because it still does not resolve life's unsolvable, timeless paradox, mortality. That one pre-existing health condition, which no one is immune to. As I have often said, the last time I checked, the human mortality rate is still hovering right around 100%. It comes for all of us. And that's why when the people point to the news and ask Jesus why bad things happen to people, he responds not by answering their why, but by asking them what. What is becoming of your life? Because one way or another, this life will end. And what will we have to show for having lived it? He tells a parable about a fig tree that will not bear fruit. For 3 years, the gardener cares for it, waters it, fertilizes it, but still no figs. The landowner comes to check on the tree, but seeing no fruit, orders the gardener to cut it down. Why waste good soil with it any longer, he asks. But the gardener says, let's give it one more year. I'll dig around it, fertilize it, water it. Maybe it'll produce figs next year. If it doesn't, then maybe we can chop it down. A healthy fig tree will normally produce figs in its first year. It's not uncommon, actually, for fig trees to produce fruit within the first 6 months. Waiting 3 years is pretty generous. Giving a fig tree 4 years to prove itself would be unstinting, magnanimous. And yet the gardener says, give the tree another year. It's grace. It's a plea for grace, a second chance. This parable is an invitation to consider what we are doing with our lives, with the time that we still have. Maybe we will live a long life, maybe not. But either way, life is still short, and there's no time to waste. The time, according to the parable, is not really on our side, and yet God is on our side. God is calling us in the time we have left to wake up and live into our truest self. It's tempting to hear this parable as a call to produce more. It might sound a lot like the whole point here is that this fig tree is supposed to become a fig factory, like the more figs, the better. This interpretation would be a huge mistake because there's no mention in this parable of any kind of fig quota at the end of that 4th year. This isn't a lesson about becoming more productive. It's a lesson about giving that fig tree one last chance to live into its identity as a fig tree and to start doing fig tree things, doing what it was always meant to do in the first place. The landowner isn't expecting or asking or demanding that the tree do anything it cannot inherently do, or to be something it inherently is not already. Just be a fig tree and do fig tree things. Start bearing fruit or stop taking up good soil. It's your choice, but you have a year to decide. Which makes our question for Lent profoundly practical. If you only had 40 days to live, how would you spend the time you have left? It gets to the deeper question, what is God calling you to do with your life? And do the ways you currently spend your time fulfill that calling or impede it? If you had only 40 days to live, would you spend another minute of it mindlessly scrolling through social media posts of so-called friends you actually haven't spoken to in decades? Or would you use that time to check in on those closest to you, or to reconcile with someone from whom you're estranged, or to pour into someone who really needs you right now? Would you waste another minute of your precious time composing a snarky email to someone who might have offended you in some way? Or would you use that time to write a thank you note to someone for whom you're grateful, or a note of encouragement to someone who looks up to you? Would you spend hours binge watching the latest Netflix series that everyone's talking about? Or would you get off the couch and go meet your neighbors, or go in search of some thin places in the world, or spend some deep time with friends and family, or some time alone in prayer or meditation? Something like 108 billion people have lived throughout history. 93% of them are dead. Some of them achieved great wealth and fame. Most are barely a footnote to history. Regardless, they would all likely tell us, if they could, that we have the one gift they all would give anything for: today. What keeps us, like that fig tree, from being who we are and bearing fruit in the world? Maybe it's the assumption that we have all the time in the world. Like the present can wait. You know how we spend most of our lives looking back on our past, reliving and regretting and ruminating, and looking forward to our future, as Tom Petty once said, running down a dream, going wherever it leads, as if what is real and meaningful is either forever behind us or ever before us. And meanwhile, that tree is our one and only life. It's taking up precious soil and losing valuable time. God gives us another year in the parable. It's not a call to do more or even to be more. It's a call to maturity, to become more fully what we already are. The fruit we are called to bear is born from the inside, but we can't make it grow. The Apostle Paul once called this fruit the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, goodness, self-control. We can't make this fruit just appear overnight in our lives as if they were resolutions. Try to resolve to be more patient and see if your resolution can survive even the morning commute to the office. Try to resolve to be more joyful and see how it goes for you when the pipe bursts in the basement ceiling and your teenager misses curfew by 2 hours, and the dog is in the ER after swallowing another tube sock, and then the furnace goes out. The fig tree, it cannot decide one day that figs would be a great idea and then suddenly produce them. Life, faith, love, the most important things, they don't work this way. It all depends on whether that tree is in the right soil, it's getting fertilized. It depends on sunlight and air, the grace and care of the gardener, and our willingness to let all of these do their work over time, with our commitment to make the most of that time that we are given. Which means we should worry less about the fruit and just try to be the best tree we can be. The fruit will come if we give ourselves to the work of becoming the tree. In March 2000, the Georgia state legislature was engaged in this bitter debate over a bill to strengthen penalties for hate crimes. The House had voted 83 to 82 to table the bill when Dan Ponder, Jr., a Republican from a conservative district in the southwestern part of Georgia, rose to the floor to speak. And he told his colleagues that all his ancestors had owned slaves and that his great-grandfather had fought as a Confederate in the Civil War. That when he was in the 3rd grade, his classmates had cheered when they received the news that President John F. Kennedy had been assassinated. He told of this African-American woman who had raised him from birth, who had taught him more than anyone else the difference between right and wrong. And he revealed to his colleagues there how one day, when he was a boy about to leave for school, this woman leaned over to him to give him a kiss on the cheek. And he turned his head away because he had been taught all his life that black people were not supposed to kiss white people. He spoke of the shame that he carried ever since that day. He said, I was forced at that age to confront a small, dark part of myself. And I pledged to myself that day that never again would I look in the mirror and know that I had kept silent and let hate, prejudice, and indifference negatively impact another person's life. He said, I finally have figured it out. The only way we are ever going to make progress in this world is when somebody gets up and takes a stand. He said, I stand before you today, and I urge you to pass this hate crimes bill. Ponder's speech drew 2 standing ovations, and the House subsequently voted 116 to 49 in favor of the bill. Soon after he gave that speech, Ponder retired from the Georgia legislature and returned to private business. Our takeaways for today. Time is not on our side, but God is. When we wake up to our lives, the fruit will come. It's not too late. So what are you waiting for?